Hello guys, Robert1 here, coming at you with a new Yu-Gi-Oh video, and in today's Yu-Gi-Oh video, we are going to be doing the future of Yu-Gi-Oh along with Charmander in the background as always. And as we always do in the future of Yu-Gi-Oh, we're basically going to be looking at the new support coming out in Ancient Guardians, the new reptile support with the good Snake Rain card in the game and everything along those lines, see how good it is, discuss it, look at it, see if it's any good, and hopefully Konami have made a decent reptile deck for once. So anyway, let's actually get into this archetype, take a look at it, hopefully it'll be good, because honestly, looking at reptile decks, they've never really been super amazing. Like, the best one is like Venemaga, and well, we all know that that's just a win con card that isn't even easy to pull off and is nearly impossible to pull off, so hopefully we'll be seeing some pretty good stuff from this too. So let's start going down and looking at these cards. So we got the Abhyss from the deck building pack. Are they actually just called the Abhyss? They're called the Abhyss. Alright, and it's called the Null Dreg of the Abhyss, which is a level 4 reptile effect, 0 attack, 0 defense, and you can only use the first and second effect once per turn. If first effect, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, send one dark reptile monster from your deck to the graveyard. So it's a light monster that sends other monsters to the graveyard? Well, other dark reptiles? Okay. So it looks like Snake Rain's already going to be good because it sends 4 reptiles to the graveyard, and if you're sending reptiles to the graveyard, well, Snake Rain's going to get busted. Second effect though, if you control no monsters or you control an Abhyss monster, you can special summon this card from your graveyard, but banish it when it leaves the field. You cannot special summon monsters while this card is special summoned by this effect in the monster zone except reptile monsters. So it's pretty much just a free summon from graveyard while it's in grave, and it sends another dark reptile to the graveyard by sending this card to the graveyard. So it's basically always just a free special summon, which is actually really nice. But wait, you can only use this card's first and second effect once per turn. Yeah, so you can use both effects in the same turn, which is actually pretty decent. This is actually a pretty good card. Just being a free special summon and being a card that just sends other cards to the graveyard can be really good depending on what the other cards you are sending to the graveyard are. So next we got the Nihil Dreg of the Abhyss, which is a dark reptile effect with 0 attack and 2000 defense. And you can only use the first and second effects once per turn each. First effect, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard, send one light reptile monster from your deck to the graveyard. Okay, so I'm assuming that these are the 2 starter monsters you want to see. You want to be seeing Nihil and Null at the start of your turn. So these are the 2 that you're going to want to be seeing to be able to send your other reptile monsters to the graveyard from the deck, outside of obviously Snake Rain. So that's good. And its second effect is though, if this card is normal or special summon, you get one Abhyss spell from your deck to your hand. That's not bad. So pretty much what this is, it's just a free searcher for any of the Abhyss monsters. Now, the only problem I have with this is that it doesn't really have a graveyard-based effect, which I was kind of expecting, but a lot more of these monsters could have graveyard-based effects, so it's fine. But being a free searcher is really good, and if the deck has a way to revive this to gain more consistency, even better by me. Like, legit, if you have one that you say is you send it to the graveyard and then special summon an Abhyss monster from your graveyard, then you can just go ahead and use that, which is actually pretty decent. So let's continue on though. So we have Fulgi, Haze of the Abhyss, and it's a light reptile effect monster, 1800 attack, 1400 defense. Okay, so now we're getting into some of the bigger beater monsters, and you can only use the first and second effect once per turn. First effect, if this card is sent from your field to the graveyard or special summoned from your graveyard, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls and one monster in their graveyard with an equal or higher attack, special summon the target in the opponent's graveyard to the field, and if you do, send the target they control to the graveyard. So if this card is special summoned, you just get to target one opponent's monster and one monster in their graveyard, and if the monster in the graveyard has equal or higher attack, you just basically say, okay, I'm going to special summon the one with equal or higher attack and get rid of this one. I don't think that's a really good effect because you're basically giving your opponent more, which isn't something you really want to be doing, but knowing Konami, there has to be a reason for an effect like this, so hopefully there's a card in the archetype that can benefit from your opponent having higher attack points, but I'm not a fan of that effect at all, really, because you're just giving your opponent something bigger, and you don't really want to give your opponent bigger things, you want to give them smaller things, which is not my personal best. But what's its second effect? If this card is in your graveyard, you can send one card from your hand to the graveyard, add this card to your hand. Alright, so it's got a way to free add it to your hand, not bad, and you can send any card, which is actually pretty decent as well. So you always really have access into an 1800 beat stick, which is nice. It's nice to have access into an instant 1800 beat stick, and I like that kind of effect to be there. So that's pretty good. The first effect, not so much. The second effect, I actually kind of like. Because you could just be going ahead and sending like cards that you don't really need in your hand, such as maybe this, so you can gain the additional ability to link summon into a reptile-based monster, or you could be special summoning, or you could be just sending this so you can get it out of your hand. Like you can send things to get more advantage, which is nice. So yeah, let's go on to the next one though, which is Zoha, Haze of the Abyss. This is the dark version. Wait, so I'm guessing that the light and dark versions are basically mirrors? Like, that's kind of what I'm getting the gist of this wise, and there's a lotus in there, I just realized. Okay, so Zoha, Haze of the Abyss is a dark reptile effect monster, 1500 attack, 1700 defense. First and second effect can only be used once per turn each. And its first effect is, if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard or special summoned from the graveyard, you can have your opponent draw one card, and if they do, you add one Abyss monster from your deck to your hand, except Haze the Abyss. Then each player sends one card from their hand to the graveyard. So, my first thought on this is, I'm giving my opponent more advantage, but they're going to send a card to the graveyard as well. And personally, that is really bad. Like, I never want to give my opponent the ability to activate a card in their hand that would be activated when they send it to the graveyard. But at the same time, this gives you the ability to search an Abyss monster from your deck to your hand. So it's just like, I can get the free advantage, but at the same time, I'm also losing a card, and my opponent can potentially get a really good card and then get rid of either a bad card or send a card to the graveyard that would trigger, which isn't something that I personally like. So I really don't think that effect is a good effect. Like, having the ability to search is always nice, but it gives your opponent too much advantage depending on what they're playing. So, such as, like, if they're playing a Burning Abyss deck, they just send a Graph to the graveyard and they summon a Seer, and then they can just, if we kill the Graph, then they just summon back the Seer, and then they've kind of got that kind of going on. Or if they're playing, I don't know, like Thunder Dragons, then you just set them up with a monster in graveyard to be able to banish 2 to potentially go into Chaos plays, or just a lot of decks that have graveyard triggering effects really just gain a lot more from this kind of effect. So it's just like, I don't really like that. I don't like how you're giving your opponent a card and then they're sending a card that could be really good to the graveyard. That's something I just don't like. But what is its second effect? If this card is in your graveyard, you can send one card from your hand to the graveyard, add this card to your hand. So it's basically got the same effect as the other Haze of the Abyss, and I'm starting to realize that they basically are mirror versions of themselves. You've got the dark ones that are like the mirrored reptiles or the transformed versions of themselves, and then you've got the light versions, which are basically just the originals, or vice versa in that kind of way. So that's kind of cool. I like how they're doing that, but so far I'm not too happy with some of their effects. So we're going on to a big one now, a level 8. Curse Dawn of the Abyss is a light reptile, 400 attack, 2400 defense, and you can only use the first and second effect all the time. First effect, if this card is in your graveyard, you contribute one monster, special summon this card, then your opponents can special summon one monster from their graveyard to their field, but its effects are negated. Again, I don't like giving my opponent free resources. I'm basically saying I'm going 1 for 1, and then my opponent gets a +1. That's what I'm seeing here, and I don't like that. I don't like giving my opponent the ability to +1 in any form, sense, or anything of the imagination, because it doesn't make sense. Why would you want to give your opponent the advantage? But hey, we'll continue reading. Second effect, if this card is special summoned, you can target one level 4 or lower Abyss monster in your graveyard, special summon it, but banish it when it leaves the field. Again, I'm going to say this now. You're giving your opponent a negated monster, and you get to special summon a monster, so you're basically both going +1, which I feel like this is kind of like the whole thing of the deck. You're giving your opponent a lot of pluses compared to not really anything else, and I don't really like that. I don't really like giving your opponent more advantage than they should have. And this is a deck that's saying, I'm going to give you more advantage than you should have. Now, obviously, there are a lot of reptile monsters that affect attack points, and giving your opponent a monster is kind of necessary to, gain more advantage, search, use effects. But when I'm looking at this, I'm just thinking, sure, those could be good, but at the same time, I don't want to give my opponent an unnecessary advantage. So, and I've not really seen any cards that say I'm going to turn your opponent's monster into a 0 attack point monster. So, I'm not really into this kind of thing, but its second effect we've already read, it's just a free summon, which is nice. It gives you the ability to get a free summon. You can trigger off effects such as the Zohar, and you can trigger off effects such as this, which just allows you to go ahead and change your opponent's monsters. You can go ahead and trigger this, which just gives you a free Abhyss spell or trap card, which is actually pretty nice. So we'll continue on though. Hopefully there are different ones that are better. So we got Aleph, I think that's how you actually pronounce it, is Dusk of the Abhyss, which is a dark reptile effect monster, 2000 attack, 800 defense. It can only use its first and second effect once per turn, obviously, as all the rest. And its first effect is, if this card is sent to in your graveyard, you contribute one monster special on this card. Then your opponent can add one monster from their graveyard to their hand. Now, I'm a little more happy with this one, because even though I'm giving my opponent one free card, I'm getting a monster on board that can attack them for some damage. So I'm a little more happy with this version of the effect, but still I don't really like it. But anyway, the second effect, if this card is special summoned, you can target 2 of your banished monsters, including at least 1 reptile monster, return them to your graveyard. Now here's my issue with that. Your opposite version special summons just like it was special summoned for the opponent. So why can't this version of it add them to hand? I don't like that. I really don't. I feel like it is not necessary and it's just beating around the bush. I don't like that, honestly. But anyway, Aron, King of the Abhyss, is a light reptile effect, 2500 attack, 2800 defense. It is a level 9? No, level 8. Man can't do quick maths. But yeah, level 8. And its first, second, and third effect can only be used once per turn each. First effect, if this card is sent to the graveyard, you contribute 2 monsters special summon this card. Okay, so this is obviously going to be a better card in terms of the rest. Second effect, if your opponent adds a card to the hand, except during the draw phase, you can send 1 random card from their hand to the graveyard. Alright, that's pretty good for the fact that it makes cards like this a lot better, because they're just going to go ahead and add cards from their hands, and it makes cards like this, for instance, a lot better as well, because they're sending 2 instead of 1. Like, it's really good. It gives you the ability to play around a lot of things that your opponent has, which is nice. But yeah, let's see what else it does. Its third effect is, if a monster your opponent controls is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can add 1 light or dark reptile monster from your deck or graveyard to your hand. Okay, if a monster your opponent controls is sent to the graveyard by a card effect. So pretty much, this is getting the triggers from this, where you go ahead and summon this from the graveyard, and then you go ahead and exchange monsters, and when your opponent special summons that monster, then you get to go ahead and trigger this card, well, send it to the graveyard to go ahead and add a light or dark reptile monster from your deck to your hand. So that's pretty good. That's actually really nice for this kind of deck, just having the ability to add a light or dark monster. And I can see the synergy between more of the cards now, but it doesn't really change my thoughts on those effects, to be honest. Now we've got Amnesia, Queen of the Abhyss. Reptile effect, 2700 attack, 2100 defense. Third, second, and first effect once per turn each. First effect is, if this card is in your graveyard, you contribute 2 monsters, special summon this card. Same as the other one. Second effect, if a monster is special summoned from your opponent's graveyard, you can send 1 card they control to the graveyard. I mean, again, synergy with the monster that switches from grave. And third effect is, if a monster is sent from your opponent's hand or deck to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 light or dark reptile monster from your graveyard. So basically, it's just the 100% opposite of this, where this one would add to hand, this one would special summon from deck to hand, this one would special summon from the graveyard. This one is if your opponent special summons, they send 1 random card they control to the graveyard. This one is if they send 1 random card from their hand to the graveyard. Like, it's just the 100% opposite of all of them. So, yeah. And here we go is Yugioh Abhyss, Deity of the Abhyss. Light reptile effect, level 10, 3100 attack, 2200 defense, and it can only use the first and second effect once per turn each. First effect, if this card is in your graveyard, you can tribute 3 monsters to special summon this card. Okay, so 3 tributes to summon this. Its effect must be great. Second effect, once per turn, while face up on the field, quick effect, you can send all monsters on the field to the graveyard except face up monsters that was special summoned from the graveyard. Huh? Wait, what? Wait, what? Once while face up on the field, quick effect, you can send all face up monsters on the field except face up monsters that were special summoned from the graveyard. Huh? So what? This is a non-destroying, non-targeting dark hole that only doesn't send things to the graveyard that were special summoned from the graveyard. And its main effect is this: if this card is in your graveyard, you can tribute 3 monsters to special summon this card. This is just generically good. This isn't even needed in this archetype. This is just a generically good card. What? That's actually insane. This is an out to so many different things in the game. It's an out to Dragoon, it's an out to big boards, it's an out to so many different things. And for 3 tributes, that's actually insane. This is the first card in the entire archetype I'm like, I like this. I really, really like this card. Now, would I use it in its own deck? I would use it in other decks. I would side this card. Like, legit, there's so many ways to get monsters into the graveyard. There's so many ways to special summon multiple monsters that there's no reason not to side this card, because it literally just says I'm going to send all monsters on the field to the graveyard. And it's not even once per duel, so if it does get, so if I send it to the graveyard, get 3 monsters on the board again, and then just tribute them, then I just go ahead and summon this again and wipe the board. That's insane. That's actually really, really strong. I like this card a lot. This is a good card. I like this card. This card is good. But so far from my impressions on the monsters, for the monsters, I'm going to say they're really, really situational. Like, they all have their own clauses. They all have their own effects. And looking at all of them, it's like, like, I think the best ones are the Nihil and the Null, because they obviously go ahead and send them to the graveyard. Fulgi, Haze, and Zohar, they're really just in tune with these big monsters here, which really need them to go off to be able to trigger. And then you've got these ones here that don't really do much either, so it's just like, I think they're good, I just don't think they're amazing. I feel like they've got their own little area, and we'll have to see what they do there. But honestly, Abhyss is insane. But let's go on to the spells and traps now. So the field spell, Depths of the Abyss. Field spell, you can only use the first and second effect of this card once per turn each. If a face-up reptile monster you control is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, you can target 1 card your opponent controls, send it to the graveyard. That's not bad, just a free send to the graveyard, really, really nice. Second effect, if this card is in your field spell zone and is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can send cards from the top of your opponent's deck to the graveyard equal to the number of reptile monsters with different names in your graveyard. Okay, so they kill this, I say mill your deck. That's pretty good, depending on the deck you're against. I'll take that. And it looks like, oh, they only have 1 field spell. I am going to be going into so many trap cards, aren't I? Emptiness of the Abyss. Okay. Continuous trap card. You can only use the first effect once per turn. During the main phase, you contribute 1 reptile monster. Then target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard, special summon it to your field, but send it to the graveyard during the end phase. That's actually not bad. Being able to steal opponent's graveyards is always nice, and that's actually a pretty decent effect to have, just to be able to go ahead and be like, oh, nice graveyard you got there, let me look at it, cool, I'm going to tribute this and steal it. So that's a pretty decent effect right there. That's not bad. I feel like that's a decent effect. Second effect though, if this face-up card in your spell and trap card zone is sent to the graveyard, send all face-up non-reptile monsters you control to the graveyard. Understandable, this is a reptile deck and this card can summon cards from your opponent's graveyard, so I can see why they would have that clause. Now, this card is Invasion of the Abyss, a normal trap card, and you can only activate 1 card with this card's name per turn. Special summon 2 Abyss tokens, Reptile, Dark, level 2, attack 0, defense 0. If you have 8 or more Abyss monsters with different names in your graveyard, you can apply this effect. Special summon 2 reptile monsters with different names from your graveyard. Okay, so pretty much this is just like a free summoning token card. I was kind of expecting decent amount of token cards from this deck, just for the fact that you have to tribute 2 monsters, you have to tribute 3 monsters, you have to tribute a lot of monsters to be able to get to where you want to be in this deck. So it makes a lot of sense to have a lot of ways to tribute monsters in the deck. But honestly, this wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting a spell to be realistic, because a hard once per turn spell that summons 2 tokens is already in the game. There are a lot of stuff that already do that, and I can definitely see Konami making, or even people using the token generating cards in this deck already. So I feel like just making a trap card that does it was really irrelevant. They could have just made another spell, but I see why they would make it a trap just because the amount of spells that actually do it in the game. But yeah, but last card is Snake Rain, which sends 4 reptile monsters from your deck to the graveyard. Absolutely insane in this deck. But final thoughts on this deck, in all honest opinion, this deck seems really lackluster to me. Like, it has a lot of different effects and has a lot of different things it can do, such as, for instance, we've gone over it, like this one can go ahead and change monsters on the field, summon one with higher attack or equal attack, which honestly I don't think is good, because there's no real way to alter the attack points of that monster in the deck. Sure, there's reptile monsters out there that can do that, but doesn't change the fact that nothing in this deck can do that. You've got this one that can go ahead and add an Abhyss card from your deck to your hand, but your opponent gets to draw a card and then they have to send a card to your graveyard, so that's not really good in my personal opinion. You've got these big monsters that can special summon monsters from your opponent's graveyard, and you gain effect and get special summon cards from your own graveyard. And then you've got this that just go ahead and tribute a monster, special summon this card, then your opponent adds one card to their hand, and then you go ahead and put 2 reptiles in the graveyard, like, and then you've got these big things that gain effects when you trigger all the other effects in the Abhyss archetype, such as if your opponent adds a card to their hand, you send one kind of card from your opponent's hand to graveyard. Going with this and going with this, your opponent would send 2 cards and you would get 1. If you're going with this, if your opponent special summons a monster, your opponent would send 1 card they control to the graveyard. It's just like, then they're not really losing anything, and they're not really getting a lot of things. And you need to have every one of these things set up to actually guarantee that you're going to be doing any of these effects to begin with as well. And there's no real way in this deck to guarantee those effects. So looking at the Abhyss archetype, I'm really just thinking that it's cool to see. It's a really cool and interesting archetype. Konami have tried to make reptiles decent, and looking at it, if you mix it with other reptile strategies, such as maybe a reptile strategy that changes things to 0 attack, and then you go in for big damage, and then you go ahead and try to do all these other things in reptiles, utilize Snake Rain to send all these cards to the graveyard. Sure, you could have a really good time, and also use a ton of token generating cards, like the Photon one, a lot of token generating cards that kind of banned as well, which is kind of upsetting, but it's just like this deck doesn't have a lot of really nice things. Like, its best thing, in my personal opinion, is Yugioh Abhyss, because this thing literally is so generic, being that you can literally just tribute any 3 monsters to special summon it, and you can literally just use this effect while it's face up. So literally just summon 3 monsters, special summon this, clear the board, and then just go ahead and continue special summoning after that, because obviously a lot of decks can actually do that. So it's just looking at the deck, looking at all the cards in it, I'm just like, I'm not very impressed. And even the field spell, and field spells nowadays are supposed to be really strong, the field spell doesn't really do a lot. All it does is, if your opponent kills one of your monsters, you just get to send 1 card they control to the graveyard, and if it's destroyed in the field spell zone, well, you can just mill your opponent's deck. That's not amazing. That's not great. But honestly, guys, if I was to play this deck, it's not something that I personally looking at and think I'll play. I'll probably try some builds of it, try to make something out of it, but it's not really amazing in my personal opinion. I feel like they could have done a lot more with it. I feel like they went really complicated in a lot of the effects. They went really down on it, and that's not really a good thing to have in a deck. But guys, what's your personal thoughts on this deck? Like, they got some really good cards, as I said. They've got a free send to the graveyard, they got free special summons, they got free searches, they have some that really are convoluted, like the Haze of the Abhyss monsters right here. They've got really weird ones like Dawn of the Abhyss monsters that we just give your opponent an advantage, and also can give you something back, but you're still giving your opponent something. And then you've got the King of the Abhyss that just works with the entire archetype, but you need to set it up first. What is your personal thoughts on the Abhyss archetype? I would really love to hear your thoughts and opinions, guys, because I am obviously just one person. I have my own opinions on it, but I want to see what your opinions are as well. So tell me all of those thoughts in the description below. If you enjoyed the video, guys, don't forget to press the like button, subscribe to the channel, and all of that good nice stuff, so I can go ahead and show you more good content in the future. And please don't forget to check out all the links in the description to my Instagram, where I'm posting things whenever I can, where I'm doing my Discord, where we go ahead and have talks. If you ever need to ask me a question, Discord is probably one of the best places to ask me, because I'll be looking in there, and I'm normally on Discord anyway. And also just go ahead and check out any of the other links as well down there, guys. It's always good to know, and all of that good stuff. But guys, this has been me and Charmander in the background, and I will see you guys in the next one. Robot1 signing out. Honestly, the Abhyss, it's not that great to me.